Hello, everyone. Merry Christmas, Happy Kwanzaa, whatever it is that your culture celebrates. Just the arrival of the new year, hopefully, which will not be as shitty as 2024. Today's topic is the endgame in Syria. You know, the regime has changed overnight to the surprise of all of us experts. And then there are just many thousands of opinions how this whole thing will end. Will the Syrian civil war end? Will the country finally find peace? Will more than 10 million refugees ever go home? Will the new government turn out to be a new Taliban, as in Afghanistan, or moderate its previous views and be able to transition to a long lasting peace that unites dozens of factions, ethnic groups, and sectarian groups in the country? Of course, since this is Real Turkey channel, I also want to talk Turkey's involvement, which is great, huge. Nobody likes chaos beyond its borders, and an unstable Syria has always been a threat, actually a plethora of threats for Turkey. Turkey played an important role in mobilizing and arming Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, the current regime in Damascus, and hopes to derive benefits. Let me tell you my conclusions ahead of time because this is going to be a long video. A, in the short term, let's say within a year or two, the Syrian conflict will probably get worse. There will be huge bloodshed, I am afraid. B, at the end, there will be peace. C, Turkey will be one of the primary beneficiaries of Syrian peace if and when it takes hold. Now, I would like you to understand that there are other conflicts like the Ukraine war, like the Gaza and Lebanon wars versus Israel. But compared to Syria, these are much easier to resolve in the sense that there are only two sides. You know their demands. And if the bloodshed ever stops or both sides get tired of fighting without a clear hope of victory, they will at the end sit down around the table and work something out. Syria is completely different. Syria is probably one of the most diverse countries in the Middle East. Lebanon is, of course, very diverse. Iraq, much less so. Iran, two ethnic groups, three ethnic groups, Kurds, the Azeris, and the Farsis. But in Syria, you got the minority Nusayris, which are an Alawite branch, which is usually affiliated with the Shiite branch of Muslim, but that's not true. It's an organic, very homegrown type of religion. The majority Sunnis, the Druze towards the south, the Israeli border, numerous Islamic factions, Islamic communities. I'm sorry, Christian communities, Kurds, probably 10 to 15% of the population. That's the ethnic slash sectarian groupings. Then you got a secular Syria. Even under Assad, obviously a brutally oppressive regime, but it was fairly secular. And then you got the religious, the devout portion. Hayat Tahrir al-Sham won a victory against Assad, which makes things much easier, but it doesn't have full control of the country. Neither does it seem to have a plan to bring all these factions together in a peaceful and representative and equitable way so that everybody can work towards peace and everybody has a stake in maintaining that peace. I'm sure if you're watching this video, you have watched other Syrian videos where the main focus of outside experts is that Hayat Tahrir al-Sham used to be a fundamentalist organization, a Sharia-based organization, and that once the honeymoon is over, They shed their wolf skin and return to their bad old ways, create a regime as oppressive as Taliban in Afghanistan, for the lack of a better example. Honestly, I'm watching numerous videos about Syria and reading as much as I can. I don't think that's a huge concern. I'm sure there would be a lot of give and take between the fundamentalist instincts of Hayat al-Shahra and the other secular groups, but the world is largely united in wanting a secular regime. And so far, Mr. al-Jobani, or with his new name, Mr. Ahmad al-Shahara, as fundamentalist as may be, strikes me as a pragmatic man who can arrange his priorities. And his first priority is for his forces, hopefully peacefully, to gain control of the entire country, to bring together different factions and forge a new assembly first, a parliament, then a new constitution, and finally elections. That's not where his task will end. I think there are roughly 10 to 12 million Syrian refugees in Jordan, Turkey, almost in every country of the world, in Europe, many millions. They should be brought back at the time when the country's resources are almost down to zero. There is no infrastructure, there is no money, there are international sanctions. The central bank has been raided. In the last years of the Assad regime, Syria entirely survived on fiscal donations from Iran and Iraq and drugs trade, a drug called Coptagon, which is very familiar with truck drivers in Turkey, which is sort of like math. Now, how do you build a fiscal base? How do you tax people? How do you convince the rich donors, which is Arabs, America, Japan, to lift the sanctions and contribute the budgetary shortfall so that at least basic services can be provided? People don't go to bed hungry because this is one of the major reasons of riots, as we have seen in the past. And finally, repair the infrastructure. Why do I think all of these will lead to another bloodshed or account settling? I wouldn't call it a civil war because it won't be between very well defined and opposing factions, but among those who have been brutalized by the Assad regime and people who are rightly or wrongly identified as Assad supporters or informants. You may have watched very disturbing videos about mass graves, although there is no definitive proof that the Assad regime just simply pitched 150,000 corpses, mutilated and tortured corpses, into these holes. I do take these very seriously because we have seen them in Iraq. Now, imagine a country where after 30 years 25 years of brutal Assad oppression, when almost every family lost a few beloved ones, there is freedom. And the natural instinct of humanity is to kill those who have hurt you, in particular in our region, where blood feuds are very common and an accepted practice. So this will be the first stage, I'm afraid, and the anger would focus on the minority Alawites. In the second stage, the Kurdish question will have to be resolved one way or other. Kurds, quite rightly so, occupy the northeastern corridor along the Turkish and Iraqi borders. They're not Arabs, they're culturally different, and they want autonomy. They want a confederation where the foreign affairs and central problems are solved by Damascus, but otherwise they're left to run their own affairs as they want. Hayat Tahrir al-Sham doesn't want that. Turkey, currently both a protagonist and antagonist in the story, wants any Kurdish organization, be they NGOs, the militia, the political organization to be completely dismantled, simply because while these are not an extension of Turkey's nemesis PKK terror organization, they are strongly affiliated. And some of their cadres, managers, or executives are directly from PKK. In any case, Turkey has always been paranoid about her own Kurds rioting and asking for secession. So, whether they are actually guilty of such a thought or not, Turkey will destroy Syrian Kurds simply because there is no one to stop her. I feel sorry for the Kurds. I am afraid there will be a mass migration of Syrian Kurds to Iraq and to other countries. The same thing may happen to Nusayris. Both Nusayris and Syrian Kurds have families, affiliated tribes, kinships, large organizations that are familiar with them who may take them. And of course, then there could be a battle between several factions in Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. While there is not that much discussion about it, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham is actually a loose coalition of hundreds of different militia groups, the common denominator of which was to getting rid of Assad. Now that that has been accomplished, of course, their conflicting demands ought to be resolved. All of these can be done peacefully, but I don't think Hayat Tahrir al-Sham has that capacity. Not because necessarily they are fundamentalists, but simply because, look, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham's history is that it was pushed back all the way to the Turkish border in the Idlib province and only survived because Turkish military outposts and Turkish artillery and drones defended them against Assad's army. Apparently, it displayed a very positive performance in terms of governing that war-ridden province, but from governing 4 million people who are united in their hatred of Assad to governing a country with hundreds of different interest groups is a completely different matter. I don't think they have the competence. I approve a lot of things Mr. Ahmed al-Shara did since he assumed power with Assad's fall. But today is Saturday. He appointed a transitional government, all members of which came from Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. As a goodwill gesture, he should have appointed members from other factions. So, in a nutshell, there will be bloodsetting. Why will that not turn into a very prolonged war, like in Libya, between Al-Kaftar and the more Islamist government? Well, simply because there will be no foreign help. One main reason, not the only reason, but one main reason why Assad lost power is because Iran and Russia have been financially and militarily exhausted. One because of the war against Israel, the other because of the swamp in Ukraine. And at the end, Assad simply lacked the money to pay his soldiers and lacked the weaponry to fend off attacks from rebels. This time, Russia and Iran are out of the game, and since their troubles at other fronts continue, they are very unlikely to play the role of the disruptor in the near future. The rest of the world just wants a peaceful Syria. I'm sure every country has a different plan or intention for Syria, but people want to, finish this chapter and move on to bigger problems. You may argue that Turkey and Israel are new disruptors, but they are not invasive forces. I think Israel just wants to build a buffer zone around Golan Heights so that the new government, or if there is no new government, the new civil war doesn't spill over its borders. I don't think it has any intentions to invade large parts of Syria. Turkey wants to get rid of Kurds, and it has some possessions along the border. Turkish governed cantons like Afrin, now Tel Rifat, Manbij, the Turkish allied military has recently captured Tel Abyad, etc. But they too intend to pull out of Syria. All they want is to make sure that when they leave, a Kurdish secessionist or terrorist movement doesn't arise from his ashes. And Turkey genuinely wants peace in Syria for reasons I will explain in the future. And as importantly, Israel did something that's completely against the Geneva Convention, but actually is pretty pragmatically useful, which is bomb the crap out of Assad's weapons warehouses. So when people start fighting, they won't have chemical arms or heavy weaponry, and I don't think the world will help them to acquire new ones because, look, Syria is poor. It has minuscule oil production. Its agricultural base is barely enough for itself. I mean, you want Libya to be your friend, and the regime in Libya to owe you simply because Libya is very rich in terms of hydrocarbons. Syria doesn't have such wealth. So from that point, it's not important to the world. They just don't want Syrian refugees and another war. I suppose smoking a cigarette is not against international YouTube rules. So I'm just gonna light one up while urging you never to take up smoking. Truly a disgusting habit. So much trial and tribulation, with much trial and error, al-Shara and Hayat Tahrir al-Sham will finally cobble together a coalition government, bring back the Syrian refugees, probably send the Iranian and Afghani Shia who were settled there by Assad home, and then they will start from scratch. It will take 10 years to rebuild Syria. I've searched quite thoroughly, but I couldn't find not even an exact, but any estimate of how much it will take to rebuild Syria. There are figures for Ukraine, but not for Syria. I assume it's going to be in the multiple of hundreds of billions. The example I use frequently when I talk to my clients or my Turkish audiences, the current situation in Syria is very familiar to the Turkey's earthquake devastated zone, where the damage is estimated slightly in excess of $100 billion. So take that, multiply by 2, 3, and you get 200, $300 billion. That money is very difficult to find simply because nobody has a vested interest in investing into Syria. There would be zero returns from it. So it will be very painful. But I think if they pull together, Syrians will at the end manage. Unfortunately, I don't imagine Nusayris, the Alawites, and Kurds will play a major role in the new government. It will be tightly controlled central government, but I hope it will be only mildly Islamist like Turkey and not fully Sharia based. And the secularists will see no intervention in their lifestyles, like no silly bans on the education of women or drinking alcohol or the mandate to cover women's faces. If Ayat Tahrir al-Sham goes that way, then you're talking about another 10 years of civil war. So it's an ugly story, where the happy ending is not good, but better than what we have now. So let's move on to Turkey, Turkey's involvement. Turkey has wanted to get rid of Assad since the beginning of the civil war in 2012, 2013, and it committed a huge mistake of harboring all sorts of Syrian refugees without UN supervision. Most of these are genuinely people who fled the war, but there were a large number of jihadis and murderers among them. Moreover, Turkey essentially opened as a gate for any foreign jihadi or mercenary who wants to fight against Assad. That, of course, blew back on our faces, where now ISIS has more than a couple of thousand sleeper cells in Turkey, a lot of followers, and has committed atrocious terror acts since 2016 or so. Also, Ankara never did the right thing. If we wanted to get rid of Assad, we should have sent in our army and just completely destroyed him. In 2016, Iran's martyr General Qasimi persuaded Russia that if Syria is gone, their interests in the region would be eliminated. So Russia came in big, sending its air force as well as the Wagner Group and then regular forces. And Assad managed to push back the rebels all the way to Idlib province and to the east of Euphrates, which of course was very bad for Turkey. I am not aware of the Syrian Kurdish entity called PYD-YPG, or the umbrella organization, which includes symbolically some Kurdish tribes, the Syrian Democracy Forces, having any intentions against Turkey. Turkish Interior Ministry claims they have registered 3,000 attacks from PYD-YPG, but these were probably in retaliation of Turkey's brutal bombing of Syrian Kurdish infrastructure and the ethnic cleansing of Kurds in the Afrin province, which is right next to Idlib, so to the east of Euphrates. And this time, too, Turkey doesn't have to militarily eliminate the Syrian Kurdish organization. We could befriend them and negotiate our differences peacefully, but that's not the way Turkey operates. As I've said, Turkey's Kurdish paranoia is completely irrational, and it doesn't only apply to Kurds in Iraq and Syria, but also to our own Kurds, who are actually second-class citizens living under martial law. So it would be extremely optimistic to expect Turkey to be patient and to talk to Syrian Kurdish leaders to get rid of the PKK elements, to make peace, and probably sign an agreement that they will never pose a threat to each other militarily. American intervention under Biden administration may still avert the worst outcome, which is Turkish tanks and air force rolling into Syria and killing these poor people. But I'm not so sure. Biden administration is a lame duck. Trump has made it very clear that he wants no parts of Syria. He also praised Erdogan for strong leadership and for a friendly takeover of Syria, so that's where Trump's mind is. America's only interest in Syria is that there are still ISIS elements in the south, way well in the desert. Also, there is a major prison with more than 4,000 murderous jihadis, which the Syrian Kurds guard, and another one, actually a refugee camp with a population of roughly 20,000, where their relatives, friends, families, etc. live. And if Syrian Kurds were forced to abandon these facilities, these people will spill over like the COVID virus, a super spreader event. Now, Ankara is offering to United States to take over the supervision of these facilities, which would take at least two brigades, roughly 4,000 soldiers, maybe more, an armored division maybe. But Turkey can't do it. And then American forces will withdraw from from Syria, which will allow Turkey to do whatever it wants to do with the Kurds. To clear my conscience, I must make my position clear. I'm sort of stuck between, explaining what's good for the people and objectively what might happen. I choose the objective analysis over my sentiment. I feel sorry for the Kurds, but I don't see any future for autonomy. Once Turkey eliminates that threat, I think it will also, the military establishment, the deep state, whatever you call them, will feel much more relaxed about Turkey's own Kurds and a reconciliation, perhaps a new constitution granting Kurds equality rights with the ethnic Turks may be achieved. This is the topic of another video because it would take us too far away from the subject of Syria. But I think within 6 months, Turkey, possibly with the help of its allied militia and even Hayat Tahrir al-Sham and Sunni tribes, will be able to dismantle Syrian Kurds. And from then on, Turkey will be a major instigator of peace. It can do a lot. Hayat Tahrir al-Sham is not a Turkish proxy. While they were reigning in Idlib, they proved many times when it doesn't suit their interests, they don't give a frig for Turkey. But they trust each other because we armed these people and protected them and had good relationships. Ideologically, too, even though Erdogan is not fundamentalist, he's a political Islamist, so they talk the same language. What can Turkey do? A, train a new army, which is to be founded soon, the police force, open more border gates for UN and other international aid companies to send whatever is necessary for the people, become the Sherpa of Hayat Tahrir el-Shar in its international affairs, pursue an active campaign to help it to prove to Western nations that it doesn't deserve these sanctions, which will go a long way towards facilitating Syria's rebound or recovery. If there is peace, of course, the biggest upside for Turkey is some or many of roughly 3.5 million Syrian refugees going home. I have done videos about Syria and the problems Syrians cause in Turkey. Once again, I'm not anti-immigrant, but if a country's population, which was 75 million 10 years ago, swells by 10 million migrants in 10 years, social unrest and unemployment of ethnic Turks is inescapable. And that's what happened. Turks don't want Syrians. There has been a new research, a survey by Areda Survey Agency, which shows that many Syrians would be willing to go back. And indeed, I think at least 30% would go back immediately. The rest would wait for infrastructure to be rebuilt. I mean, there is nothing to go back to. You were a small shop owner in Aleppo, and now the entire neighborhood is leveled. You have no livelihood there, and no one is putting paychecks into your pocket until you get on your feet. So that too would be an arduous process, but even a couple of 100,000 would do wonders to reduce political tensions in the country, to restore wage stability, and to reduce the dissatisfaction of the people with Syrians and with Erdogan, who might help him in the next election. The biggest upside is economic, of course. As I've said, Syria will have to be rebuilt, a couple of $100 billion. There would be a donors conference under the supervision of UN. Turkey could persuade skeptical Gulf Arab countries to pitch in large sums. Why are Gulf Arab countries skeptical? Even though they are fundamentalists, they don't want fundamentalist liberation organizations, lest their people emulate it. So they like this kingdom, the king priest type of arrangement rather than the free fervor of several Islamic factions speaking out their opinions and interpreting Quran according to their own wishes. But if Turkey can prove to Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait, that Tahrir al-Sham poses no threat to their internal security, they will come in with big money. Europe too. If Europe can be persuaded, there are millions of refugees there too, that some of these will return. They will be fairly generous. Then, of course, there will be international tenders to select the companies who will actually do the rebuilding. And there, Turkey has a huge advantage. Look at the region. We are the only country with a world-class cement, iron and steel, and construction materials industry. Iran and Iraq don't have that capacity. So even without political bargaining or horse trading, Turkish companies will get a lion's share of these tenders. Turkish labor and professionals will probably find advisory roles in Syria, and that's a huge economic benefit for Turkey. Finally, prior to the war, when Assad and Erdogan were close friends, so much so that their families spent their vacations together, the provinces of Turkey bordering on Syria were having a renaissance. Syrians spent their money in Turkey. They came in for health tourism, for shopping, for just, vacation. Turkey is not one of the best countries to spend their summer, but if you live in Saudi Arabia, Syria, and Iraq, believe me, you get your money's worth. Excuse me. So this is a long process, but in the short term, Turkey will have to defend her borders very closely to make sure no more waves of refugees flood to our country, no more jihadis escape, or no more jihadis or Assad's members of Assad regime escape to Turkey, and keep Hayat Tahrir el-Sham towing the correct line. In the longer term, peace is good for everyone. Peace means more trade, more economic activity, more tourism, and Turkey is going to be a very just huge beneficiary of these trends. I wish Syrians a Merry Christmas or Happy New Year too. I mean, we're talking about the travails of the Ukrainian people, the Lebanese, the Palestinians, but believe me, Syrians suffered as much as they have, and not for reasons under their control. Leaving everything aside, Freudian slip there. Assad's departure is the best thing in the world. I hope Putin extradites him to La Hague to be tried at the International Court for Human Crimes or whatever, and he spends the rest of his life in prison. Okay, I'm done. As I've said, I plan to do at least one video a week, all these injuries aside. And I hope you like this video. I always enjoy your comments. And if you like it, subscribe or share it with your friends so that I can increase my traffic. Once again, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to the entire world and to my tiny audience.